Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. Just wanted to go through my actionable list for tomorrow morning. I believe right now the futures are actually up, not a huge amount. I don't know if they're going to hold overnight. I'm showing the Nasdaq up 17, the Dow's up 54. They opened them up a lot more than that, not quite. I think over 30 on the Nasdaq right off the bat this morning when we opened up at 3 o'clock my time. It's 3:47 p.m. right now, so we'll see how these open up in the morning. I was actually hoping we'd open down either a lot or slightly. And that might set up some sort of a shakeout. I'm not really sure if this market is going into a full-blown correction. We'll find out, but there's still a possibility that we could run into some support somewhere in this area of congestion. I was talking about this in the report, and we'll see how this plays out. This volume has not really been heavy, and it's really been light for the last couple of weeks. So it's more of an indecisive market, it strikes me as, and we'll just see if we break down or not. But I'm guessing that earnings are going to figure into a lot of this, and we've got several big earnings reports coming this week and, of course, next week as well. So I don't know that we can necessarily draw any firm conclusions. I know I got an email from one person who wanted to short Apple, and nothing like being early or late to the party, rather. Or sarcastically, I might say nothing like being early, right? I mean, the thing's already busted hard off the peak here, but you can see it was wedging all the way up, and you're right at the 200-day line now, so you're going to short it here. Okay, nothing like taking the low risk route, right? But I'm always interested to see how people don't really understand, or how little they understand about short selling, and they're ready to jump on something in the same manner that they're ready to jump on something on the upside when they see a bunch of strength, that they want to jump on something, breaking out and running up. And in the old days, that used to work. And same thing goes on the short side. They see something blowing up and they want to short it after it's already blown up, 10% or so, or close to that. And I think with Apple at the 200-day line, the potential here is that you're going to undercut this 164.47 low and then turn back to the upside. That's what I'm thinking. And I got earnings coming out not this week, but next week. And it may just be in a holding pattern. A lot of people are downgrading the stock and raising questions about their sales, etc. And that's scaring people out in the short term. But I think you may have gotten a washout on Friday, and we'll see. And that killed a lot of other chip stocks that and suppliers to Apple, that create parts for Apple. We saw Skyworks Solutions getting blasted. Broadcom, which still has Avago's symbol. I wish they just make it BRCM. You're going to call the company Broadcom. Make the symbol look like it's associated with the company, please. It constantly throws me. I'm always referring to it as Avago, but you can see it. This thing just rallied up into the 50-day moving average here, and it blew up. So now coming down, the volume's heavy. Hopefully you guys can see this pretty well. I know that the resolution on the videos is extremely sharp. I know I got one email from somebody saying that things look murky, but I think that has to do with your settings on your own screen. If you have an old computer and you're running, 800 by 600 or something like that, I'm running at the highest resolution, so these things are crystal clear. And when I look at the videos afterwards, they're about as clear as you could possibly want them to be. So anyways, if anybody's having those issues, I would check your own resolution settings. And if you have a really old computer with 800 by 600 resolution, you're kind of living in the Stone Ages, so you might think about upgrading. Anyways, let's go through my my actionable list and start out with Carbonite. Mostly what I'm interested in right now are companies that are not going to be reporting earnings for at least a couple of weeks. I mean, some of these might be in the next week or so. Maybe I can get a quick pop. I mean, this market, you can get 2-3 days of a good pop to the upside, and you can take it. And I think that's mostly what you're getting, because you're getting a lot of swing trading type action, and there's no real big money trends right now. I think that's pretty obvious. So you want to be on the alert for pullbacks, and things that might have a pop back to the upside ahead of earnings. So my minimum is a couple of weeks, but you could fudge a little bit. If it's something that's going to be next Wednesday or Thursday, then you got about a week and a half to mess around and see if you don't get some kind of move. Otherwise, if you're trying to play long-term trends, you think you're going to buy something breaking out and let it run and make big money, I think you're pushing it, at least for this market right now. So I would be more opportunistic. So, anyways, first name's Carbonite, pulling into the 10-day line, volume's drying up. It already had the pop. We were looking at it before along the line, and it's popped. So here we come again. So that may be one to look at. I've got all of 23 names actually. Sienna looks okay here. I think I talked about this one before. You had a pocket pivot in here on this day, and then you pulled in slightly, the volume drying up in here, and then you turn out. And it's interesting, this is one of the few optical names, fiber optic names that's doing well in the face of that news that the Commerce Department has banned sales to ZTE, which is a Chinese corporation. That hit names like Light and some of the others like Finisar. And I'm guessing that Sienna has no exposure, so that's why it didn't get hurt. And the pullback earlier in the week, which was on Monday, it was actually just a big buying opportunity. But I like this name. They don't report until June, so it's acting well. If I got to pull back into the 10-day line, I'd definitely be looking at it there. CSX, I'm watching this as it comes into the intraday low, which is 59.19 on the Bible Gap Up day, which is here. And your volume's drying up, so that looks normal. Look for it to hold. You're going to have, I think, a couple of other rails are going to be reporting, I think, like Union Pacific, which is coming. I think they're going to report, well, EPS due 426, but this is what I love about these guys. I used to work for this company. I can't understand why they can't get their data together, but what, 426, 4 days, I guess they're close enough. How many days? Yeah, that isn't 4 days. I take that back. And you're pulling in, so we'll see what these guys do. But notice it's in a base, so I mean it could be set to break out. Today is the 22nd. For some reason, I was thinking today was the 20th, so I'm always running 2 days behind. Anyways, time just kind of blows past. Funko, this is a very interesting story, and I've been going back and forth with one member who she's been doing a huge amount of research on this, and these guys have a really hot product, these little bobblehead things. My son has several of these, and I actually have one. Philip Rivers version. He's the quarterback for the San Diego Chargers who moved to LA a couple of years ago. My wife bought me one when they moved to LA, so not that I was all hot for it, but she thought it was a cute offbeat gift to give me for my birthday, I think it was, a couple of years ago. Anyways, notice they're hanging very tight, and this is like the worst performing IPO in the last 17 years. I think the thing came out at 12 bucks and then blew apart. So you can see here's the IPO day right here. And so they came out, $12 a share was the offering price, and it trades down to a low of what, around 7 on the first day of trading, and that's amazing, right? But in the meantime, I mean, since then it's set up, and I'd call this a big cup. And here's your handle, and you're just really tight along here. They come out with earnings on the 14th of June, so that's a ways away. But we've looked at this one before. And it is interesting. I'd go online and just check it out and look at their videos. They're actually making little movie vignettes, I guess you would call them, with some of their Marvel characters. They do stuff like I saw Ellen DeGeneres Funko character that they had, and yeah, there are these little bobbleheads with the big heads and big eyes, big dark brown, black eyes. So check it out. But the pattern looks very good here. I can't deny that. So we'll see what this thing does, if it can muster up a breakout. But it's very thin. Trades 215,000 shares a day, so it's very, very thin. That's the index. Intuitive Surgical is another one to keep an eye on. They already announced earnings, had a big gap up on that. They're pulling in. Volume's drying up. So I think it's 448 and change down here. So we closed Friday at 456.27. So you're coming in. You're about 2% away, but watch this thing as it comes in. It may stop somewhere in here. And they had a blowout quarter. So with names like Apple getting blasted, maybe we see some rotation in some of these medical names, which a lot of them, including the biotechs, have been languishing for a long time. And this guy just broke out of a base. Here comes Netflix. It's going to test. It looks like it's going to test its I think it's 223.77 low on the Bible Gap Up day. So you're coming in, volumes picked up slightly on Friday, and it probably gets hit because Apple's getting hit. And I'm not sure if you have ETFs that are weighted in Apple and other NASDAQ names. If that starts getting hit, they got to sell off everything, so that may run into some selling. But if it does fill the gap and hits the 10-day line down here, that might make it a very opportunistic entry at that point. Now, if it fails, then you've got yourself a late-stage failed base, and you got to be open to that as well. Nutanix doesn't report until the end of May, 524, so you're pulling the 10-day line volume is light, and picked up slightly on Friday, but this might set up, maybe even down to the 20-day line, could set up some kind of move ahead of earnings, so you have to check the short interest on that and see what that looks like. Take a look over here. You can see on MarketSmith you can get short interest. So we got 1.8 days. You can see that's up here, and that would be about close to 10 million shares. Well, close to 10 million shares short on a float of 117 million. Not a huge amount, so not like you're going to get a big short squeeze here, but it is pulling in, and it has been a good trader. It's been acting well since it got back above the 50-day line. Surprisingly, I mean, it stutter steps its way higher, but it's still doing it. Pasa Seguro, now I told you guys be opportunistic on this one and look for a pullback to the 50-day line, and bingo, you got it, and you get a nice pop off of there. Now you're drifting back into the 20-day and the 10-day in here, and the volume's drying up. So that looks like it may come into another entry point. They're not expected to report earnings until the middle of June, so I like that. Palo Alto Networks hanging tight. I think it gets dragged down with the rest of the NASDAQ when you see names like Apple and all of its suppliers getting ripped and the semis getting ripped. And I think it gets tagged too, but the cybersecurity area has remained somewhat resilient lately. So we haven't seen huge moves out of these stocks in a long time. They've kind of been quiet, which has been a bit of a paradox because you hear all this news all the time about hacking and security breaches and blah, 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 and yet these names don't necessarily start having big moves. They did have big moves a couple of years ago, and I think we may see some of that start up again. And this is probably my favorite name. Fortinet's the other one. This Rise Education, we played this one before, remember? It had a nice, this is where I first picked it up, right here on this day on the Voodoo pullback, right at the 10-day line, and then pop. We came off, and then we set up again, another Voodoo pullback right into the 10-day line and pop. And at that point, I told you guys you might want to take your profits because now it's getting a little bit too obvious, And this is where all the IBD types come in and start to see the pocket, or not the pocket, but the standard breakout potentially coming out of the cup with handle when the handle is being formed near the peak of the right or the left side of the cup. So, we were finding it down here when supposedly this is an improper cup with handle because the handle's in the lower half. But that sort of stuff doesn't really hold up these days. It's a different market. SailPoint's been acting very well, and I like the way it held the 10-day line on Friday in the midst of the market getting whacked and volume dried up, so that looks good. Obviously, the buy point that I pointed out, and I think the first video I did was at this point right here, and you got the pop the next day, and then you drifted in slightly, and then you came out. So this was a breakout. I don't know, that doesn't look too good. Let me try that again. This is a breakout here on big volume, and you pull in. So I like it on pullbacks here, so this becomes your new reference for pullbacks that might be viable or that offer lower risk buy points. Salesforce, I think, watch this one in Workday. ServiceNow, which is another one in that group, is expected to report earnings, I think, on the 24th, which would be Tuesday, I think, after the close. And I think these will move in sympathy. Now, I don't know if these things are setting up to go higher or they're just ready to roll over and break, but this is the big daddy of the group. Workday looks okay, too. Let's go over here. I like the way I go back and forth here. Workday, same thing. It had the pocket pivot, and it's drifting in. Volume picked up on Friday here. You can see that. But you had this big pocket pivot. And I was talking about it in here when it was hanging along the 50-day line. And you notice how these things like to screw with your head because what happens is it's basically straddling the 50-day. So it's not holding the 50-day. It's dropping below it, and then it's going back above it. It's dropping below, and it's going back above it. So the 50-day doesn't necessarily become a line of support as much as it becomes a zone, a fuzzy zone of support. So there's a little bit of a Heisenberg principle here. Everybody sees it, so it doesn't exactly work perfectly, but you do get this zone around the 50-day line that serves as the support zone rather than the support line. So that's one way to think about moving averages, and that's something that's given rise to what I like to call the moving average undercut and rally setup, where something dips just below the 50-day line, then turns right back above it and takes off. So let's keep going. Smart Global. This is like, okay, now I'm off the deep end on opportunism here, but you have been drawing up on the volume here. Let me check something real quick here. Volume is down 36%, excuse me, on Friday, so you're coming into the 50-day line, and maybe this is an opportunistic type of thing, because a lot of these semis, and I think this is semi, even though this says electrical components, what do they show up here? Computer data storage. I mean, the semis get hit, these guys get hit. Data storage, I'm sure Western Digital, probably WDC has been getting hit. Let's check. Yeah, it almost looks the same. So they're all in the same group, and they've been getting tagged along with the semis. So maybe at this point it's a little bit too obvious. You're going to get some sort of a bounce off the 50-day line. You might undercut these. While you're undercutting these lows in here, maybe undercut this low and this low, and you come back above. Sort of a stretch maybe, but we'll see. But I'm always watching these sorts of patterns. I don't write them off. I know someone was on my Twitter page today saying that, a common mistake that investors make is to buy the stocks that are down the most during a correction, and that's a bunch of baloney, because some of the best moves occur in stocks that are coming off of their deep doo-doo lows, and we've seen that happen many times. I threw up on my Twitter page, you can check it out, a chart of AMAT, Applied Materials, back in early February, late March, or no, I'm sorry, late January. And that thing had a huge move, and it was down probably one of the most. It was probably one of the stocks that was down the most during that correction in February. Anyways, here's Solar Edge, hopping and bopping, and back and forth around 10-day, 20-day. Volume is drying up. They don't announce earnings, I think, until June. So I think this one may have potential for a pop. Volume drying up in here. So let's keep going. I want to get this done in a few minutes. I don't want these to be too long. Splunk is coming into the 10-day line as volume dries up. You can see volume drying up here. You're coming in the 10-day line. This has been a strong name. Now, this is not necessarily directly related to ServiceNow, but it might have a sympathy move on Tuesday after the close when ServiceNow reports. So be aware of that. Steel Dynamics. Now, I know steels might seem like a stretch, but you have been seeing money moving into rails and oils, and so why not steels? And you're noticing it's coming back above. You had a pocket pivot here. Well, that's actually extended at this point, but it's regained the 50-day line. It's trying to hold, and you might call this day right here a supporting pocket pivot because of the volume, where it closes well off the lows. It's down only a pinch on the day, and the volume is pretty high, so it's like a pocket pivot, and it's what I would call a supporting pocket pivot. So if it's pulling into the 50-day line, that might be where you want to take some shares and see if that works. Viva had a pocket pivot here. I think it's been getting tagged along with the rest of the techs. It's pulled right into the 10-day, and the 20-day volume was very light on Friday, so that might bring it into a viable position. Earnings aren't expected until the end of May. Moving right along here, Zebra is the final one. This actually pulled down. This is more of a robotics play, I believe. This pulled into the 10-day and the 20-day. Volume picked up, but notice how it held in a tight range. So I view that as getting support at the line. Earnings don't come out for about 2 weeks or so, so you might get some kind of pop off of the line, and we'll see what happens. But anyways, and that's pretty much all I've got. You want to keep an eye on some of these other rails, though. Like I was saying, Union Pacific is supposed to report on 4/26, so that would be 3, 4, 5. So that would be Thursday, and I think they report before the open, I believe. Norfolk Southern is another one, NSC, and they're trying to come around. We'll see what happens, but I like CSX as one of the better ones. Here's U.S. Steel, as I was talking about steels. Maybe it's in an ugly duckling position. Volume coming in a bit on Friday. It's not really very heavy. I should probably change this chart view. And no, you can't get these chart views on. No, that's not working. Let's go. There we go. Yeah, volume's kind of drying up on there. But I'm watching these because they're down there. They look ugly, and they might turn. Anyways. Then you can look at some of the other ones. Reliance Steel. That one is looking a lot like Steel Dynamics. and you can go through the whole group and just kind of look and see what's going on. Some of these might be turnarounds, and I like these sorts of patterns when I see them. And the market's been correcting, and you got to have something coming out. Usually, the best moves occur in stocks coming off the lows of their bases, as we've seen. Another one to keep an eye on is Light. This week, it's heading for the 200-day line again. It may just be building another base. I don't know. But it was hit on the news on Monday about the Commerce Department banning sales to ZTE. Light didn't have any sales to ZTE before it talked. Well, it's agreed to acquire Aclara, which has 30% of its sales with ZTE, and that would give Lumentum 10%. So, now if they go through with the buyout of Aclara, they might they'll have a 10% exposure, and I don't know what that means for their overall sales. On the other hand, what if they decide, hey, we're going to buy this company and 30% of their sales go to a company that has now been banned as a company that could be a Chinese company that can be sold to? We don't want anything to do with you. We're not going to buy you. And if that happens, then you might see the stock run. But they've got earnings next week, which I think is on Wednesday. I don't know. We'll see what happens then. But they usually do pre-announce. So I don't know. Keep an eye on this one. I think it's more of an ugly duckling situation. So, and keep an eye also on, I think I should have Baozun on here, and I don't. But it's because it's right at the 20. I talked about it in the report, so I probably should add that thing. Quick add to group. There we go. And watch the other Chinese names. I know they all look like garbage, but I notice Alibaba has come up above this low here, and is drifting in a little bit. And here's a 200-day line, so it's above the 200-day line and on an undercut and rally through this low. It's also come above this low and held, so it is an undercut and rally land. So that that's the big stock Chinese name. And the others are just getting blasted, but they could be in positions where they'll start to turn. So you want to look for these ugly duckling type setups in the group, because it may turn out, as I wrote in the report, it may turn out that this whole U.S.-China trade war of words turns out to be not much in the end, or they come to some agreement that lifts some of the pressure, and boom, a lot of these things come flying back to the upside. So we want to keep an eye on those. Anyways, we'll see what happens tomorrow. I think it'll be an interesting week given what we've seen over the past couple of days, in addition to the fact that we're going to have a lot of big names reporting earnings like Facebook and Twitter and Amazon. I think Google also is reporting. So we'll have a lot of action this week, so it should be fun. Anyways, thanks for listening, you guys. We'll catch you next time. Take care.